Okay, a couple of things to note about the sampling distribution as well. Again, this is your population distribution. Every single value in your population represented it. This is your sampling distribution. Again, and we'll just say this is assuming a sample size of 30. If it was a sample size of 50, it'd be taller and narrower. If it was a sample size of 15, it would be a little shorter and wider, to be somewhere between these two curves. Okay. One thing we need to know is, as you remember from chapter 6, you had to know the mean and the standard deviation and able to calculate probabilities. Well, the same is true also in the sampling distribution, except for you need the sampling mean distribution. Okay, so we need the mean of the sampling distribution. And we also need what's called the standard error or the standard deviation of the sampling distribution. Standard error, oops, which is basically the standard deviation of the sampling distribution. Well, in your book, it will talk about how whatever the mean of the population distribution is, the mean of the sampling distribution is also the same thing. So we know that the mean of the, so if we're given the mean of the population distribution, we know that the mean of the sampling distribution is the same number. Okay? So the mean of the population distribution is equal to the mean of the sampling distribution. So now we have that number. Now if we are given the population standard deviation, the way we calculate the standard error or the standard deviation of the sampling distribution is you take the population standard deviation divided by the square root of the sample size. Okay? So this is your standard error or the standard deviation of the sampling distribution. So you can see it's going to be smaller than the population standard deviation, which makes sense because your data in your population distribution is wider spread out. It's got a larger standard deviation than in this distribution. It's going to have a smaller standard deviation because it's much narrower than the population distribution is. So these are the two numbers you need to be sure you know to calculate probabilities using a sampling distribution. You need to know the mean of the sampling distribution, which is the same as the mean of the population, and the standard deviation of the sampling distribution, which is also known as the standard error, which is the population standard deviation divided by the square root of the sample size.